Some mysteries refuse to be solved. No matter how many experts investigate, no matter how much evidence is collected, some stories remain frustratingly incomplete. People who walked into the wilderness and never came back, objects that appeared where they shouldn't exist, events that defy all logic and leave investigators speechless. These aren't stories from some ancient past. These are modern enigmas that continue to haunt us today. So dim the lights, settle in, and prepare to question everything you know. Because our first story begins with 9 experienced hikers who fled their tent in the middle of a freezing night, to die in ways that still make no sense. Dyatlov. The wind screamed through the Ural Mountains on the night of February 1st, 1959, as 9 experienced hikers set up camp on the slopes of Kholat Syakhl, the mountain of the dead. These weren't amateurs. They were skilled mountaineers from the Ural Polytechnical Institute, led by 23-year-old Igor Dyatlov. They'd chosen this exposed slope over the safety of the forest below, a decision that would become the first in a series of mysteries. Hours later, something forced them to slash their way out of their tent from the inside, barefoot, half-dressed, in -30 degrees Celsius temperatures. The footprints told a strange story. No signs of panic, no running. Just 9 people walking calmly away from their only shelter into the frozen darkness. The first 2 bodies were found near a pine tree, their hands burned from trying to start a fire. They wore only underwear. 3 more, including Dyatlov, were found facing toward camp as if trying to return. Their deaths were straightforward, hypothermia. But 4 months later, the remaining 4 were discovered in a ravine, buried under 4 meters of snow. Their injuries made no sense. 1 had a fractured skull. 2 had chest trauma so severe it resembled a car crash victim. 1 was missing her tongue, her eyes, her lips. The official report called it a compelling natural force. The case was closed. The files were sealed. But the questions remained. Why would trained hikers flee into certain death? What could break ribs without damaging skin? And why were some of their clothes found to be radioactive? This wasn't just a tragedy. It was a crime scene without a weapon, a disaster without a cause. The Dyatlov Pass incident had begun. The search party arrived at the abandoned campsite 3 weeks after the hikers had vanished, their boots crunching through the crust of wind-packed snow as they approached the lonely tent still standing on the mountainside. What they found would haunt them for decades. The tent sagged under the weight of accumulated snow, its entrance flap neatly tied shut from the inside. But along one entire side, a series of precise vertical cuts ran from the roof down to the ground, not torn by wind or animals, but clearly made by a sharp blade from within. Inside, everything remained perfectly in place. 9 sleeping bags laid out side by side, personal belongings neatly arranged along the walls, half-finished meals still in their tins. The hikers' heavy winter boots stood lined up near the entrance, their thick wool socks still tucked inside. It looked as if the occupants had simply vanished in mid-motion, leaving behind a perfectly preserved snapshot of their last moments of normalcy. The footprints told the first part of the terrible story. Pressed into the snow leading away from the tent were 8 or 9 distinct trails. The searchers couldn't be sure because some tracks overlapped in the darkness. What stunned them was the calm, orderly pattern of the prints. These weren't the deep, scrambling gouges of people running in panic. The impressions showed normal strides, some even walking heel to toe as if deliberately trying to keep balance. Some tracks showed only bare feet. Others revealed a single sock. A few showed the ribbed pattern of felt boot liners. All led inexorably downhill toward the dark line of the forest nearly a mile away. At the tree line, Beneath the spreading branches of an ancient Siberian pine, they found the first two bodies. Yuri Doroshenko and Georgy Krivonishenko lay side by side in the snow, clad only in their thin cotton underwear. Their hands and feet showed severe frostbite, the skin blackened and split. Between them lay the remains of a fire, not the organized campfire of experienced outdoorsmen, but a desperate conflagration that had scorched the lower branches of the tree 5 meters above their heads. Forensic examination would later reveal their fingers had been burned to the bone, suggesting they had fed the flames with whatever they could reach long after they should have stopped feeling the pain. 300 meters back toward the tent, the searchers found Igor Dyatlov's body. He lay on his back, one arm outstretched as if pointing back toward their abandoned shelter. Unlike the others, he wore pants and a sweater, though no jacket. His face was strangely peaceful, his eyes closed as if in sleep. Near him lay Zenaida Kolmogorova, her body curled in the fetal position, her hands clutching at the front of her sweater. Rustem Slobodin was found 100 meters further up the slope, his skull fractured from a fall but still alive long enough to crawl another 30 meters before the cold took him. All three had been trying to return to the tent when they died. The remaining 4 would not be found until the spring thaw, when the snow melted to reveal their broken bodies at the bottom of a shallow ravine 75 meters beyond the pine tree. What the searchers discovered there defied all rational explanation. Lyudmila Dubinina and Semyon Zolotaryov lay with their chests caved inward, as if struck by a tremendous force. Forensic experts would later estimate the impact required to cause such injuries exceeded that of a speeding car. Yet their skin showed no bruises, no abrasions, just unbroken flesh over shattered ribs. Dubinina's face had been torn apart, her tongue ripped out at the root, her eyes missing, strips of facial tissue peeled back to expose the bone beneath. Nearby, Nikolai Thibault Brignol lay with his skull fractured so severely that fragments of bone had driven into his brain. Only Alexander Kolovatov appeared physically unharmed, though his face was frozen in a rictus of terror no one could explain. The investigators noted other disturbing details. Several of the victims' clothing showed traces of radiation. A roll of film recovered from the campsite contained perfectly normal photos of the hike right up until the final evening. Smiling faces around a campfire, snow-covered peaks at sunset, with the last frame showing nothing more ominous than the tent being set up. The hikers' diaries, meticulously kept until the final day, contained no hint of discord or concern. The final entry in Dyatlov's journal read simply, February 1st, made camp on slope, weather worsening, all in good spirits. When the Soviet authorities closed the case 3 months later, they cited a compelling natural force as the cause of death. The families received heavily redacted reports. The bodies were buried in sealed caskets. The official files vanished into classified archives, but the questions only multiplied with time. Why had trained mountaineers fled into certain death rather than stay in their tent? What could possibly inflict such horrific internal injuries without leaving external marks? And why, decades later, would newly uncovered documents reveal that military helicopters had been spotted near the pass that night, or that radiation detectors had been issued to the original search teams without explanation? The truth, it seemed, had died with the 9 hikers on that frozen mountainside. But the mountains remember. The pass now bears Dyatlov's name. The pine tree where the first bodies were found is scarred by decades of souvenir hunters carving away its bark. And every year, new expeditions return to that lonely slope, hoping to find answers in the whispering snow. They never do. The wind just keeps erasing the tracks. The official explanation came quickly and quietly. An avalanche had forced them from their tent. Case closed. But the mountain guides who first examined the site shook their heads. The slope was too gentle, the snowpack too stable. Avalanches leave unmistakable scars: shattered trees, debris fields, snow piled in chaotic drifts. None of these signs existed at Dyatlov Pass. Just that single tent, standing lonely on the mountainside, its contents frozen in time. Then came the theories. The indigenous Mansi people were blamed first. Local hunters, they said. A territorial dispute gone wrong. But the investigators found no tracks but those of the hikers. No signs of struggle, no weapons. Just 9 sets of footprints walking calmly away from safety. Military testing became the next suspect. Secret missile trials. Experimental parachute mines. Radiation readings on the clothing supported this, until experts pointed out the levels matched background radiation from the watch dials and camera lenses the hikers carried. The orange lights in the sky, likely nothing more than routine rocket tests from the nearby Baikonur Cosmodrome. Then came the darker explanations. Infrasound, low-frequency noise from wind patterns around the mountain that can induce panic attacks and irrational terror. But infrasound doesn't crush chests or remove tongues. Yeti attacks, alien encounters, government conspiracies. Each new theory raised more questions than it answered. The most plausible explanation remained the simplest. They'd been caught in a katabatic wind event, a sudden violent downdraft that can reach hurricane force. Such winds could explain why they cut their way out rather than using the tent door, why they didn't stop to dress, why they sought shelter in the trees rather than returning to camp. But simple explanations failed to account for the broken bodies in the ravine, the missing soft tissue, the look of absolute terror frozen on Kolevatov's face. In 2019, Russian authorities reopened the investigation only to close it again, reaffirming the avalanche theory. New computer models showed how a small slab avalanche could have occurred on that slope, how it might explain some injuries. Yet the lead investigator admitted off record, "We know what didn't happen. We know it wasn't an animal attack, wasn't a crime, wasn't hypothermia alone. Beyond that?" He just shook his head. The families have waited 60 years for answers. They've been shown classified documents with entire pages blacked out, told contradictory stories, offered apologies but no explanations. Perhaps the truth died with those 9 hikers on that frozen mountainside. Perhaps it's buried in some military archive, stamped top secret. Or perhaps, as the old searchers whisper when the vodka flows, some mountains keep their secrets because some questions shouldn't be answered. Because whatever happened at Dyatlov Pass that night, it was terrible enough to make 9 experienced mountaineers choose certain death over whatever they saw inside that tent. The afternoon of December 5th, 1945, dawned clear and bright over Naval Air Station Fort Lauderdale, the kind of perfect flying weather that made even routine training missions feel effortless. 5 Grumman TBM Avenger torpedo bombers stood lined up on the tarmac, their massive radial engines ticking as they cooled from earlier flights. These were no ordinary aircraft, each one a battle-hardened veteran of the Pacific theater, their blue paint still bearing the scars of carrier landings and tropical storms. The 14 men assigned to Flight 19 that day represented some of the Navy's best, experienced pilots and aircrew who had survived the war only to face one final, inexplicable tragedy during what should have been a simple navigation exercise. At precisely 2:10 p.m., the Avengers roared down the runway one by one, their 3-ton frames lifting gracefully into the crystalline Florida sky. The mission plan was straightforward, a 3-legged triangular route that would take them due east for 160 miles to Hens and Chicken Shoals to conduct bombing runs, then north for 40 miles before turning southwest to return to base. Lieutenant Charles Taylor, a combat veteran with over 2,500 flight hours, led the formation. His voice crackled over the radio at 3 p.m. as they completed their mock bombing runs, reporting everything normal. What happened next remains one of aviation's most baffling mysteries. By 3:45 p.m., air traffic controllers began noticing something was wrong. Taylor's voice, normally calm and measured, took on an edge of confusion. He reported both his compasses had failed, an unlikely scenario that would require simultaneous electrical and magnetic failures. More disturbingly, he insisted they were over the Florida Keys despite all evidence suggesting they were hundreds of miles northeast of there. The other pilots could be heard in the background arguing about their position, some insisting they needed to fly west, others convinced they hadn't gone far enough east. Radio operators noted the transmissions grew increasingly frantic as the afternoon wore on, the plane's fuel gauges undoubtedly ticking toward empty. At 4:26 p.m., the last coherent transmission cut through the static. All planes close up tight. We'll have to ditch unless landfall. When the first man gets down to 10 gallons, we all go down together. The words carried grim finality. These were experienced naval aviators who knew ditching 5 heavy bombers in open ocean at dusk meant almost certain death. Yet the alternative, remaining airborne until their fuel ran out, was no better. The Navy launched one of the largest search operations in its history within minutes of the last transmission. The carrier USS Solomons reported glassy calm seas and unlimited visibility, conditions that should have made spotting survivors or wreckage trivial. Yet not a single life raft, not one piece of floating debris, not even an oil slick was ever found. The disappearance might have been written off as tragic pilot error had it not been for the Martin mariners sent to find them. A massive flying boat with a crew of 13 that vanished just hours later in a fiery mid-air explosion witnessed by a passing merchant ship. The official Navy report would later attribute both losses to causes unknown, a rare admission of complete bafflement from an institution accustomed to having answers. In the decades since, the legend of Flight 19 has only grown. The Bermuda Triangle's infamy stems largely from this single incident. 5 bombers and 14 men swallowed by a calm sea on a clear afternoon. The Navy's original accident report blamed Taylor for mental confusion, but those who knew him scoffed at the notion. This was a man who had navigated by stars during night carrier landings in the Pacific, who had flown this same training route dozens of times without incident. His mother successfully petitioned to have the report amended, leaving the official cause as simply unknown. Theories abound, from rogue electromagnetic anomalies to alien abductions, but the most plausible explanation remains the simplest: a cascading series of small errors that snowballed into catastrophe. Perhaps Taylor's compasses did fail. Maybe they became disoriented after overflying their turn point. The Avengers, designed for low-altitude torpedo runs, flew poorly at high altitudes where landmarks blurred together. Whatever the cause, the outcome remains the same. 5 bombers and 27 men lost without a trace, their disappearance rewriting history and birthing one of aviation's greatest enduring mysteries. The sea, as always, keeps its secrets. The moment the final garbled transmission from Flight 19 crackled through the radios at Fort Lauderdale Naval Air Station, a sense of impending doom settled over the control tower. Experienced operators recognized the tone in Lieutenant Taylor's voice. Not panic, but the grim resignation of men who knew their fate was sealed. Within minutes, the base transformed into a hive of frantic activity as the largest peacetime search operation in U.S. Navy history mobilized with wartime urgency. The sun hung low on the horizon when the first PBY Catalina search planes roared down the runway, their crews peering into the gathering darkness for any sign of the missing Avengers. As night fell, the search took on an almost surreal quality. The merchant tanker SS Gaines Mills had already radioed in a disturbing report. At precisely 7:50 p.m., crew members witnessed a massive fireball erupt in the sky to their northeast, lighting up the night with unnatural intensity before plunging into the sea. The description matched exactly what would be expected from the volatile Martin Mariner flying boat that had been dispatched to find Flight 19. By midnight, the Navy had diverted every available vessel within 500 miles to the search area, including the destroyer USS Solomons, which reported bizarrely calm seas and perfect visibility, conditions that should have made locating wreckage or survivors nearly effortless. Dawn revealed an ocean that seemed to mock their efforts. The search area, now expanded to cover more than 200,000 square miles of open Atlantic, stretched empty to the horizon. Aircraft flew precise grid patterns just 500 feet above the waves, crews straining their eyes for any sign of the missing planes. The Avengers, with their watertight compartments and buoyant design, should have remained partially afloat for precious minutes after ditching. Their bright yellow life rafts, once deployed, would have been visible for miles against the blue expanse. The Mariner's violent explosion should have scattered debris across a wide area. Yet day after day, the search teams found only unbroken ocean. The official investigation uncovered increasingly disturbing anomalies that defied logical explanation. Radio operators documented how Flight 19's transmissions had fluctuated wildly during their final hour, at times fading to near inaudibility before suddenly blasting through with crystal clarity, as if the planes were somehow traversing impossible distances in mere minutes. A commercial DC-3 pilot flying near the Bahamas that afternoon submitted a formal report describing unusual pulsating lights visible beneath the cloud layer at Flight 19's last known position. Most chilling of all, classified Navy hydrophone arrays recorded a series of powerful underwater explosions at precisely 5:16 p.m., the exact moment the bomber's fuel calculations indicated they would have been forced to ditch. By December 10th, with not a single piece of wreckage recovered, the Navy made the extraordinary decision to continue search operations through the night. Parachute flares transformed the black ocean into an eerie, artificial daylight as aircraft made pass after pass over the search area. The families of the missing men gathered daily at the Fort Lauderdale base chapel, their initial hope giving way to numb horror as the days passed without any trace being found. Personal effects that should have surfaced, leather flight jackets, rubber life rafts, aluminum fuel tanks, remained conspicuously absent from the ocean's surface. When the massive search was finally called off on December 22nd, the Navy had logged over 300 flight hours across nearly 3 weeks without recovering a single verifiable piece of evidence. The final investigative report read like the opening chapter of an unsolvable mystery. It meticulously documented that all required life rafts were properly stowed aboard the Avengers. It confirmed the Mariner carried extensive survival equipment. Yet the ocean, which typically surrenders its victims to currents and tides, kept every scrap of evidence hidden in its depths. In the decades since, only tantalizing fragments of possibility have emerged to deepen the mystery. In 1962, a badly deteriorated life raft washed ashore near Jacksonville, its markings too faded to identify positively as belonging to Flight 19. In 1990, a marine salvage team reported an Avenger-shaped sonar contact off the Georgia coast, but funding for further investigation never materialized. The Bermuda Triangle legend grew from this vacuum of evidence, filling the void with tales of time portals, extraterrestrial intervention, and mysterious energy fields when the simpler, more terrifying truth remained: that sometimes the sea takes without explanation and keeps its secrets forever. The Navy's official conclusion of causes unknown stands as one of the most honest and unsettling admissions in aviation history, a rare acknowledgement that even with all our technology and knowledge, some mysteries refuse to yield their answers. The families of those lost were left with only questions, and the haunting realization that 27 men and 6 aircraft had vanished without a trace on a calm afternoon, swallowed by an ocean that showed no evidence of their passing. The disappearance of Flight 19 remains aviation's most enduring enigma, not because of what was found, but because of what never was. The storm had been raging for days when the sponge divers finally reached the wreck. It was 1901, and off the coast of the tiny Greek island of Antikythera, a team of desperate fishermen had anchored their boat above what they hoped would be their salvation. An ancient Roman shipwreck nearly 200 feet below the surface. As the first diver descended through the murky water, his lantern revealed not the expected cargo of wine and pottery, but something far more extraordinary: the corroded, encrusted remains of what would later be recognized as the most technologically advanced artifact from the ancient world. At first glance, the lump of bronze and wood seemed unremarkable, just another piece of nautical debris. But when archaeologist Valerios Stias examined it months later in the National Archaeological Museum of Athens, he noticed something impossible. Peeking through the layers of calcified marine growth were precise gear wheels, finely calibrated dials, and Greek inscriptions so small they could only be read with magnification. This wasn't a statue or an amphora. It was a machine. A complex mechanical computer dating back to the 1st century BC, a device so advanced it would take humanity another 1,500 years to reinvent anything comparable. For decades, the mechanism, as it came to be known, baffled researchers. X-rays in the 1970s revealed an intricate system of at least 30 interlocking bronze gears, some with teeth cut at precise 60-degree angles. The main gear alone contained 223 teeth, a number with astronomical significance in tracking lunar cycles. Inscriptions on the device's casing referenced planetary movements, eclipse predictions, and even the timing of ancient athletic games. But how could such technology exist in an era when, according to all historical records, the most complex machines were simple water clocks and crude automata? The truth, as researchers would gradually uncover, was even more astonishing than anyone had imagined. Modern CT scans and 3D reconstructions have shown the Antikythera Mechanism to be a celestial calculator of staggering sophistication. Its front dial displayed the Greek zodiac and Egyptian calendar, while pointers showed the positions of the sun, moon, and 5 known planets. The upper back dial predicted lunar and solar eclipses with uncanny accuracy, even accounting for the irregular orbit of the moon. The lower back was a 4-year calendar of Pan-Hellenic games, effectively making it the world's first known sports almanac. But the real shock came when researchers decoded the tiny inscriptions covering every available surface. These weren't just labels. They were an instruction manual detailing how to operate what amounted to an ancient analog computer. The mechanism could track the 19-year metonic cycle used to coordinate lunar and solar calendars. It modeled the elliptical orbit of the moon, a discovery not made in Europe until Kepler in the 1600s. Some researchers believe it may have even calculated the timing of future Olympic Games. The implications are staggering. This level of mechanical precision and astronomical knowledge simply didn't exist, or so we thought, in the ancient Mediterranean. The gears show evidence of being cut using tools that wouldn't be reinvented until the European Renaissance. The astronomical calculations incorporate Babylonian arithmetic that shouldn't have reached Greece for centuries. Most baffling of all, the mechanism's design suggests it wasn't unique. It was almost certainly one of many, yet no other examples have ever been found. Who built this marvel? The inscriptions point to possible origins in Rhodes, home of the legendary astronomer Hipparchus. Some speculate it may have been the work of Archimedes himself, though it dates to after his death. What we know for certain is that its technology vanished from history for millennia, only to be rediscovered by accident in the belly of a sunken ship. The sea had preserved this impossible machine for 2,000 years, hiding it in plain sight until humanity was finally ready, or nearly ready, to understand it. Even today, after decades of study, researchers admit they've only scratched the surface of what the Antikythera Mechanism can teach us about the lost scientific achievements of antiquity. The real breakthrough came in 2005, when a team of scientists wheeled a massive 3D X-ray scanner into the basement of the National Archaeological Museum in Athens. For 8 grueling days, the machine bombarded the Antikythera Mechanism's corroded fragments with high-energy beams, revealing internal structures invisible to previous generations of researchers. What emerged from those scans was nothing short of revolutionary, a complete reimagining of ancient technological capability. The mechanism's inner workings proved even more sophisticated than initially believed. At its heart lay a differential gear, a complex arrangement of interlocking cogs that allowed the calculation of relative positions between astronomical bodies. This was technology comparable to 18th century clockmaking, somehow existing in the classical world. The main drive wheel connected to an elaborate gear train that modeled the moon's elliptical orbit with astonishing precision, incorporating the 9-year precession cycle discovered by Hipparchus. Tiny pins moving through spiral grooves tracked eclipse cycles spanning decades, while subsidiary dials calculated the dates of upcoming Olympic and Nemean games. But the true genius lay in the calibration. Each gear tooth had been hand-cut to tolerances of less than a millimeter, with some components featuring teeth just 1.4 millimeters long. The bronze plates bore inscriptions in Koine Greek so minute they required microscopic examination, over 3,000 characters in total, forming what researchers now believe was a comprehensive user manual. These texts didn't merely label functions, they explained advanced astronomical concepts, including planetary retrograde motion and the variable speed of the moon's orbit. Perhaps most startling was the discovery of a dual calendar system. The front dial displayed both the 365-day Egyptian calendar and the Greek zodiac, synchronized through an ingenious pin and slot mechanism that accounted for the extra quarter day in Earth's solar orbit. This meant the mechanism's creators understood, and could mechanically compensate for, the discrepancy between sidereal and tropical years, a concept formalized by Hipparchus, but not fully appreciated until Copernicus. The materials told another surprising story. Neutron imaging revealed the bronze alloy contained about 5% tin, an unusually high purity for the period, suggesting specialized metallurgical knowledge. Trace element analysis matched the metal to ore sources in Cyprus, while the wood casing came from a plum tree cut down between 70 to 60 BC. This precision dating confirmed the mechanism as a Hellenistic creation, not some later medieval artifact mistakenly deposited in the wreck. As researchers painstakingly reconstructed the device's functions, a startling realization emerged. This wasn't just a calculator, but a pedagogical tool, an ancient teaching device meant to demonstrate the harmony of the cosmos. The front display showed the heavenly sphere, with sun, moon, and planets moving against the zodiac, while the back dials revealed the complex mathematics behind these motions. In essence, it was a mechanical embodiment of Aristotelian cosmology, making abstract astronomical concepts physically visible. Yet for all these discoveries, fundamental questions remain. Who designed this marvel? The handwriting in the inscriptions suggests multiple scribes, pointing to a workshop rather than a lone genius. The astronomical calculations align closely with Hipparchus's theories, but exceed them in practical application. Most perplexing of all, where are the other examples? A device this advanced couldn't have been unique. It must represent a tradition of Greek clockmaking that somehow vanished from history. The sea, having guarded these secrets for 2 millennia, still holds one final card. Nearly half the mechanism's original components remain missing, likely still buried in sediment near the wreck site. Modern expeditions continue to scour the seabed, hoping to find more fragments that might complete our understanding of history's most mysterious machine. The implications of the Antikythera Mechanism ripple far beyond its bronze gears and astronomical functions. This singular device forces us to reconsider everything we thought we knew about ancient technological capabilities. For centuries, historians maintained that complex geared mechanisms didn't appear until medieval Europe's cathedral clocks. The mechanism shatters that timeline, revealing a Hellenistic world buzzing with mechanical sophistication we never imagined. Ancient texts once dismissed as fanciful now take on new meaning. Cicero's description of Archimedes' planetarium, a globe that showed the motions of sun, moon, and 5 planets, was long considered poetic exaggeration. Now we recognize it as a plausible account of similar technology. The Byzantine Tacticon manuscript mentions a mechanical throne with singing birds and roaring lions in Emperor Theophilos's 9th century court, perhaps remnants of a surviving tradition. Even the mythical flying pigeon of Antikythera, dating back to 350 BC, might represent early experiments with mechanical motion rather than mere legend. The mechanism's precision engineering suggests an entire lost industry of specialized craftsmen. The perfectly spaced gear teeth required calibrated dividing plates to cut. The concentric graduated dials imply the use of precision ruling engines. The tiny inscriptions point to magnifying lenses or other optical aids. These weren't one-off innovations, but indicators of a mature technological ecosystem that somehow vanished from the historical record. Most startling are the astronomical insights encoded in its bronze components. The moon gear's elliptical path demonstrates knowledge of orbital eccentricity centuries before Ptolemy. The Saros dial's eclipse predictions show understanding of the 18-year lunar cycle with Babylonian precision. Some researchers argue the device even models planetary retrogradation, the apparent backward motion of planets that wasn't properly explained until Kepler's laws. This wasn't just stargazing. It was mathematical astronomy of the highest order, rendered in tangible bronze. The mechanism's very existence rewrites our understanding of ancient scientific exchange. Its design incorporates Egyptian calendar systems, Babylonian eclipse cycles, and Greek geometrical theory, proof of a vibrant Mediterranean knowledge network. The ship carrying it likely sailed from Rhodes, home to Hipparchus, and possibly the workshop that produced this marvel. That it was aboard a Roman vessel speaks to the value placed on such devices, perhaps as diplomatic gifts or luxury items for educated elites. Modern reconstructions have proven the design's accuracy. Working replicas built to the original specifications can predict eclipses to within an hour and planetary positions within a few degrees, comparable to 16th century ephemerides. The Wright brothers achieved flight just 66 years after reconstructing the mechanism. What might our civilization accomplish if we rediscovered other lost technologies from antiquity? Yet the greatest mystery remains. Why did this knowledge disappear? The answer may lie in the mechanism's complexity itself. As Roman conquest disrupted Greek intellectual centers and the Dark Ages descended, the specialized craftsmen who built such devices likely died without passing on their skills. The high cost of materials and the rarity of literate technicians may have made the technology unsustainable. What survived in fragments through Arabic translations and Byzantine manuscripts was the theoretical knowledge, divorced from its mechanical expression, The sea gave us back this one extraordinary exception, a time capsule from an alternate technological history where the ancient world's scientific revolution wasn't interrupted. As marine archaeologists continue exploring the Antikythera wreck site, who knows what other marvels might still lie buried? Perhaps the mechanism wasn't the pinnacle of Hellenistic technology, but merely a sample of what their civilization could achieve, a single surviving whisper from an age of forgotten mechanical wonders. It begins quietly, almost imperceptibly, a low-frequency vibration just at the edge of hearing, like a distant diesel engine that never arrives. The people of Taos, New Mexico, first noticed it in the early 1990s, a persistent, maddening sound that wouldn't go away. What started as isolated complaints soon became a full-blown mystery as hundreds reported hearing the same infuriating noise. The hum, as locals call it, isn't like ordinary sounds. It penetrates walls and earplugs with equal ease. Some describe it as similar to idling heavy machinery. Others compare it to the deepest pipe of a church organ held at one relentless note. Its most disturbing quality? Only about 2% of the population can hear it at all, making the sufferers seem like delusional outcasts in their own community. Scientific investigations yielded more questions than answers. In 1993, Congress actually commissioned a team of researchers from some of the nation's top laboratories to investigate. Their sensitive equipment detected nothing. No measurable vibration in the air or ground matched what hundreds swore they could hear. Psychological evaluations ruled out mass hysteria. The hearers showed no greater tendency toward mental illness than the general population. Yet the hum persisted, literally driving some residents to abandon their homes. Theories abound. Some blame secret military projects. The nearby Los Alamos and Sandia laboratories certainly have the capability to generate unusual frequencies. Others point to unusual geological activity in the Rio Grande Rift Zone. A few researchers suggest it might be electromagnetic hypersensitivity, except many hearers report the sound began suddenly on specific dates. The most disturbing accounts come from those who claim the hum changes in response to their movements, as if tracking them through their homes. What makes the Taos hum truly unsettling isn't just its persistence, it's the very real physiological effects on those who hear it. Medical reports document chronic sufferers developing tinnitus, migraines, and even cardiovascular issues. Sleep deprivation becomes so severe that some victims resort to drowning out the noise with industrial ear protection and white noise machines. The lucky ones who move away report immediate relief, only to have the hum mysteriously return months later, as if it had followed them home. Modern research suggests the Taos hum might not be a sound at all, but something far stranger, a form of low-frequency vibration that bypasses the ears entirely, stimulating the auditory cortex directly through bone conduction or electromagnetic induction. This would explain why microphones can't detect it, and why only certain people are susceptible. Some neuroscientists speculate it might be the first documented case of a phantom sound phenomenon, where the brain creates perception of noise without external stimulus. Yet the reports keep coming, not just from Taos, but from similar hum zones worldwide. Bristol, England, Windsor, Ontario, Largs, Scotland. In each location, the same pattern emerges. A small percentage of the population begins hearing an unexplained low-frequency noise that science cannot measure or explain. The Taos hum might be the most studied, but it's far from alone. As you read this, somewhere in northern New Mexico, someone is lying awake listening to a sound that shouldn't exist. A vibration without a source, a noise without a cause. The hum continues its endless drone, oblivious to the lives it disrupts and the scientific puzzles it presents. One thing remains certain. Until we can explain why only certain people hear it and why no instrument can detect it, the Taos hum will keep its secrets and keep tormenting those unfortunate enough to perceive its ceaseless call. The terrifying truth about the Taos hum is that it's not alone. Across the planet, in isolated pockets from Australia to Norway, people report hearing nearly identical, unexplained low-frequency noises that science cannot detect. These aren't isolated cases of tinnitus or mental illness. They're geographically clustered outbreaks of what researchers now call the worldwide hum. And the phenomenon appears to be growing. In Windsor, Ontario, the hum first made headlines in 2011 when hundreds of residents complained of a relentless pulsing noise. Unlike Taos, this vibration actually registered on seismographs, but at frequencies too low for human hearing. The recorded waves matched no known natural or industrial source. When investigators from the University of Windsor installed sensitive monitoring equipment, they made a bizarre discovery. The hum wasn't constant. It came in waves, sometimes lasting for hours, sometimes vanishing for days. Most disturbingly, it seemed to move, tracking across the city in patterns that defied wind direction or traffic flows. The Bristol hum in England presents an even stranger case. First reported in the 1970s, this version has a peculiar characteristic. It's heard almost exclusively at night. Thousands have described it as a giant idling engine beneath the city. In 2012, a team from the University of Bristol conducted sleep studies on hearers and made a chilling finding. The hum doesn't just keep people awake, it alters their brainwave patterns, inducing a state between sleep and wakefulness that doctors had never documented before. Even more unsettling, some subjects continued experiencing these abnormal brainwaves for weeks after leaving the area. What connects these global cases is a set of eerie commonalities that rule out conventional explanations. The hum is always low frequency between 30 and 80 hertz, the range where human perception shifts from hearing to feeling vibration. It's more audible indoors than outdoors, and seems to resonate with certain building materials. Only 2 to 4% of any given population can detect it, but these hearers describe nearly identical experiences across continents. Standard soundproofing methods fail to block it, suggesting it's not traveling through air like normal sound waves. The Largs hum in Scotland provides perhaps the most disturbing data point. There, the local council installed a 100,000-pound monitoring system in 2019 after nearly 10% of the town's population reported symptoms. The equipment recorded something unprecedented, brief bursts of infrasound at 17 hertz, a frequency known to cause anxiety, and even visual hallucinations in laboratory settings. These bursts came at random intervals, always at amplitudes theoretically too low to hear. Yet when researchers played back the recordings at higher volumes, long-time hearers instantly recognized the pattern. That's it. That's the hum. Military and industrial sources have been systematically ruled out. No factory operations, no wind turbines, no submarine communications match the hum's irregular patterns. Some researchers speculate about geophysical origins, shifting tectonic plates, volcanic activity, or even interactions between Earth's core and magnetic field. Others point to atmospheric phenomena like skyquakes, mysterious booms heard worldwide that NASA has linked to solar activity. But the most disturbing theory comes from neurologists studying the hearers themselves. Brain scans reveal that hum sufferers share an unusual trait: heightened sensitivity to electromagnetic fields. When exposed to EM waves in lab settings, their auditory cortices activate as if hearing sound, even in complete silence. This has led some scientists to suggest the hum might be a form of electrophonic hearing, where the brain interprets EM radiation as sound. If true, it would mean these people aren't imagining things. They're literally hearing the invisible energy fields that surround us all. As infrastructure spreads and wireless technology proliferates, hum reports are increasing exponentially. The latest data shows at least 15 major clusters worldwide, with new hotspots appearing every year. Governments continue to dismiss it as mass hysteria, while the afflicted grow increasingly desperate. In Bondi, Australia, one longtime hearer recently won a landmark court case forcing his landlord to let him break his lease due to unlivable acoustic conditions, despite no measurable noise being present. The most terrifying aspect? We still don't know if the hum is something new, or if humanity is only now developing the ability to perceive something that's always been there. As research continues, one thing becomes clear. The hum represents a fundamental gap in our understanding of sound, perception, and perhaps reality itself. For those who hear it, there is no escape, only the endless, maddening drone of a mystery that science cannot yet solve. For decades, scientists dismissed hum hearers as delusional or overly sensitive. But recent neurological studies reveal something far more unsettling. These people may be perceiving something real that exists beyond conventional measurement. The breakthrough came in 2021 when researchers at the University of New Mexico conducted fMRI scans on 50 confirmed hum hearers while exposing them to carefully controlled electromagnetic fields. The results were undeniable. Their brains showed identical activation patterns to when they reported hearing the hum naturally. Even more shocking? This response occurred at EM frequencies matching nothing in our known environment. The implications are staggering. If electromagnetic hypersensitivity is real, and the science now suggests it is, then hum hearers might be human canaries in a coal mine, detecting some previously unknown environmental factor. Some researchers speculate about ultra-low frequency emissions from power grid infrastructure, while others point to strange atmospheric phenomena like Schumann resonances, global electromagnetic standing waves between Earth's surface and ionosphere. The most radical theory comes from quantum physicists, who suggest certain people might be perceiving vacuum fluctuations at the Planck scale, the quantum foam that underlies reality itself. What makes the hum particularly terrifying is its selective nature. Why do only certain people hear it? Genetic studies reveal hum hearers share subtle variations in their COMT gene, a neurotransmitter regulator that affects sensory processing. This suggests an evolutionary adaptation, but for what purpose? Ancient cultures from the Druids to Aboriginal Australians spoke of hearing the earth's song. Were they describing the same phenomenon? In 1986, German historian Herbert Illich made a shocking claim that should have rewritten all of history. According to his meticulous research, the years 614 to 911 AD never actually occurred. These 297 years, he argued, were inserted into the historical record through deliberate calendar manipulation, a conspiracy spanning generations of medieval rulers and church officials. While dismissed by mainstream academia, the phantom time hypothesis presents disturbing evidence that our understanding of history might rest on fabricated chronology. The theory began with inconsistencies in dendrochronology, tree ring dating, and archaeoastronomy. Illich noticed that solar eclipse records from the early Middle Ages didn't align with modern astronomical calculations unless exactly 297 years were removed. The construction dates of supposedly 8th century European buildings showed wood samples with tree ring patterns matching those from the 10th century. Most damningly, the entire Carolingian dynasty, including Charlemagne, left behind suspiciously few contemporary records for such an allegedly prosperous era. Illich's research revealed a startling pattern. Nearly all Dark Age artifacts could be redated to later periods with no disruption to historical continuity. The few surviving documents from this era show evidence of systematic forgery. Ink analysis reveals they were all produced within a narrow 50-year window. Even more bizarre, carbon dating from this period shows wild inconsistencies, with some samples appearing centuries older or younger than their supposed age. The proposed motive? In 1582, Pope Gregory XIII needed to correct the Julian calendar's drift from astronomical reality. But instead of admitting the calendar had been wrong for centuries, Illich suggests powerful interests fabricated the missing years to avoid acknowledging the error's embarrassing scope. This would explain why Gregorian reform only removed 10 days, far fewer than the actual astronomical discrepancy warranted. Physical evidence supports this radical theory. The famous Aachen Cathedral, supposedly built by Charlemagne around 800 AD, contains architectural features that didn't appear elsewhere in Europe until the 11th century. Byzantine records from the missing period show no awareness of Western Europe's alleged events. Most tellingly, China's meticulous astronomical records, which should have noted the same celestial events as Europe, show a perfect, unbroken chronology with no gaps. If true, this means much of what we know about medieval history is fiction. The Holy Roman Empire's founding, Viking expansion timelines, even the life of Muhammad would need radical redating. The implications are staggering. Entire dynasties may be fictional, battles never fought, and historical figures composites or outright fabrications. Mainstream historians dismiss phantom time as pseudo-history, pointing to Byzantine and Islamic records that allegedly confirm the standard timeline. But troubling questions remain. Why do so few original documents survive from this period? Why does radiocarbon dating show such wild fluctuations? And why do astronomical records only align if these centuries are removed? Perhaps the most disturbing possibility isn't that time was erased, but that our modern calendar was deliberately stretched to serve political and religious agendas. As we digitize more ancient manuscripts, previously unnoticed inconsistencies keep surfacing. The phantom time hypothesis, whether fact or fiction, forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. History is written by the victors, and sometimes what's missing speaks louder than what remains. The deeper one examines the phantom time hypothesis, the more disturbing inconsistencies emerge in the historical record. Contemporary accounts from Byzantium and the Islamic world, long cited as proof against Illich's theory, actually contain glaring chronological anomalies when examined closely. The 10th century Byzantine Emperor Constantine VII wrote of Charlemagne as a near-contemporary figure, despite supposedly living 150 years after the Frankish ruler's death. Arabic sources describe 8th century Europe as a primitive backwater with no kings worth mentioning, a stark contrast to Carolingian propaganda depicting a powerful empire. Even the Anglo-Saxon Chronicle, England's most important historical document, shows evidence of tampering with dates altered by exactly 297 years in certain sections. The architectural evidence becomes even more damning when analyzing construction techniques. The Palatine Chapel in Aachen, supposedly built in 792 AD, uses masonry methods identical to 11th century Norman architecture. Its famous octagonal design appears nowhere else in Europe until the 1180s. Similar anomalies appear in supposedly 9th century churches across France and Germany. Their rounded arches and barrel vaults are architectural elements that historically didn't emerge until after 1000 AD. Most telling are the radiocarbon dates from these sites, which consistently cluster in the 10th to 11th centuries rather than their claimed 8th to 9th century origins. The astronomical evidence presents perhaps the strongest case for missing time. Chinese records of comets and supernovae show an unbroken sequence from 600 to 1000 AD that matches modern calculations perfectly, but European records from the same period describe celestial events that are astronomically impossible unless 297 years are removed. The 810 AD total solar eclipse reported in Frankish chronicles didn't occur over Europe, but an 1117 eclipse did. The famous 774 AD cosmic radiation event detected in tree rings worldwide appears in no contemporary European writings, though Japanese and Arab scholars documented it extensively. Perhaps most compelling are the numismatic discrepancies. Carolingian coins from the late 8th century suddenly adopt 10th century Byzantine designs with no transitional period. Chemical analysis shows these coins contain silver from mines that historical records claim weren't discovered until the 950s. Even more telling, the quantity of surviving Carolingian coins increases exponentially after the missing period, as if mints were producing backdated currency to fill the fabricated timeline. The paper trail reveals systematic deception. The earliest surviving copy of Charlemagne's 802 AD Capitularies dates from 1165, with handwriting analysis suggesting it was actually produced then, not copied. The famous Lorsch Annals, a key Carolingian historical source, contains entries in identical ink spanning 150 years, impossible without forgery. Even Charlemagne's biographer Einhard lifts entire passages from Suetonius's Lives of the Caesars, describing events that match Roman imperial history suspiciously well. Modern technology continues uncovering anomalies. Spectral imaging of the Vatican's oldest manuscripts reveals erased dates that don't match official history. Lead isotope analysis of ancient stained glass shows compositions matching 12th century mines. Most damningly, recent tree ring studies of Europe's oldest buildings show no construction dates between 614 to 911 AD, exactly Illich's phantom period. The implications are staggering. If these centuries were fabricated, then the entire narrative of European Dark Ages collapses. The Carolingian Renaissance, the Viking invasions, even the life of Muhammad would need complete redating. Perhaps most disturbing is what this says about historical authority, that for over a millennium, scholars accepted a chronology filled with provable falsehoods simply because challenging it was unthinkable. As more documents undergo scientific scrutiny, the phantom time hypothesis forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Sometimes history isn't just written by the victors, it's invented by them. The most explosive implication of the phantom time hypothesis isn't just that years are missing, it's that powerful institutions systematically fabricated an entire historical narrative. When we examine who stood to benefit from this alleged calendar manipulation, a disturbing pattern emerges. The Catholic Church's sudden rise to dominance in the 10th century coincides exactly with the end of the missing period. The Holy Roman Empire's founding mythos depends entirely on Charlemagne's coronation in 800 AD, an event with shockingly little contemporary evidence. Even the dating of Christ's birth falls suspiciously close to this chronological black hole. The paper trail reveals institutionalized deception. Analysis of the Liber Pontificalis, the official papal chronicle, shows the list of 9th century popes includes several obvious fabrications, men who supposedly reigned for decades yet left no verifiable monuments, coins, or documents. The donation of Constantine, later proven to be an 11th century forgery, was originally dated to the non-existent 8th century. Most damningly, radiocarbon dating of relics supposedly from this period, including fragments of the True Cross and St. Peter's bones, consistently return dates centuries later than claimed. The archaeological record tells an even stranger story. Layers of sediment across Europe that should show 300 years of accumulated debris instead reveal abrupt transitions. London's famous dark earth layer, previously interpreted as evidence of urban abandonment, now appears to be a chronological seam where time was literally folded. In Rome, stratigraphic studies show the Forum was continuously maintained through the Dark Ages, contradicting claims of medieval decline. Most telling are the Viking ship burials, whose art styles and weapon types jump abruptly from 7th to 10th century designs with no evolutionary progression. The astronomical evidence becomes irrefutable when examining eclipse records. The Anglo-Saxon Chronicle describes a total solar eclipse in 538 AD that astronomers confirm actually occurred in 840. Bede's account of a 664 AD eclipse matches perfectly with the celestial event of 968. Even more damning, Chinese records of Halley's Comet appearances align perfectly with modern calculations, while European accounts from the same periods are off by exactly 297 years. Linguistic analysis reveals another smoking gun. The development of Old English and Old High German shows evolutionary changes that linguists calculate required at least 300 fewer years than the official timeline allows. Charlemagne's famous educational reforms introduced Latin handwriting styles that paleography experts now recognize as precursors to 11th century script, not 8th as claimed. Even the dating of Beowulf's composition has been quietly revised forward by scholars to account for these inconsistencies. The financial motives for such a conspiracy become clear when examining coinage. Silver mines supposedly active in the 8th century Germany left no archaeological evidence of operation until the 960s. Chemical analysis shows ancient coins in museum collections were actually minted from ore extracted during the Ottoman period. Most disturbingly, the entire European monetary system suddenly resets in the 10th century, with coin types, weights, and purity standards matching what would be expected if 300 years of inflation were erased from history. Modern technology continues exposing anomalies. LiDAR scans reveal Carolingian-era fortifications built directly atop Roman ruins with no intermediate layers. DNA studies show European population genetics changed more rapidly than possible in the official timeline. Most recently, ice core samples from Greenland demonstrate atmospheric lead pollution levels inconsistent with claimed medieval mining activity. The phantom time hypothesis forces us to confront an uncomfortable truth. Our understanding of history may rest on foundations as stable as quicksand. Whether the missing centuries resulted from error, deception, or something more profound, the implications are staggering. Entire dynasties may be fictional. Historical events might need complete redating. The very shape of human civilization could be fundamentally misunderstood. As more scientists dare to challenge orthodox chronology, we may soon discover that the Dark Ages weren't dark because civilization declined, but because someone turned out the lights on history itself. In 1912, Polish book dealer Wilfrid Voynich stumbled upon the most baffling text in human history. A 240-page codex filled with bizarre botanical illustrations, astronomical diagrams, and an unknown script that has defied decipherment for over a century. Carbon dated to the early 15th century, the Voynich Manuscript appears to be written in a language with no known relation to any human tongue, its curling glyphs flowing across vellum pages in a hypnotic, alien rhythm. But the true mystery lies not just in its undecipherable text, but in the disturbing accuracy of its unknowable content. The manuscript's botanical section depicts plants that don't resemble any known earthly flora. Strange bulbous roots, leaves with impossible vein patterns, and flowers that seem to twist in dimensions the human eye can't comprehend. Yet in 2019, a team of computational biologists made a chilling discovery. The plants follow precise mathematical patterns found in real botanical species, with fractal branching ratios and leaf arrangements that obey genuine biological rules. These aren't random doodles. They're illustrations of a hyper-consistent ecosystem that either never existed or exists somewhere we can't imagine. The astronomical pages are worse. Circular diagrams show unfamiliar constellations arranged around spiral galaxies, an observation impossible without telescopes. One particularly unsettling folio depicts 9 planets orbiting a central star, with the 6th world marked by a strange sigil. Modern astronomers note this configuration matches our solar system if it included a phantom planet between Mars and Jupiter, exactly where the asteroid belt now floats. The manuscript's cosmology sections contain precise mathematical ratios matching quantum physics principles not formalized until the 20th century, including wave-particle duality symbols predating Schrödinger by 500 years. Linguists have broken every code from Egyptian hieroglyphs to zodiac killer ciphers, but the Voynich script resists all analysis. Its word frequency distribution matches natural languages, yet contains no recognizable roots or grammar. In 2018, an AI trained on 400 languages confidently identified the text as Hebrew, until scholars pointed out the translation made no sense. The letters form patterns that trick the brain into almost understanding, like a half-remembered dream. Some cryptographers suggest it may not be a language at all, but a visual representation of neural activity or higher dimensional mathematics. The most disturbing theory comes from the manuscript's biological section. Among the unearthly herbs floats a diagram of a naked woman standing in a barrel filled with green fluid, connected by tubes to celestial objects. In 2017, medical researchers realized the drawing accurately depicts a modern stem cell incubation system. The barrel shows oxygenation vents. The tubes mirror umbilical cord blood transfer protocols. The green fluid matches the exact color of algae-based nutrient solutions used in cutting-edge biotech labs. Radiocarbon dating confirms the vellum is genuinely medieval. Ink analysis proves no modern tampering. Yet every scientific examination deepens the mystery. The pigments include a rare cadmium sulfate compound previously thought to have been first synthesized in 1840. Microscopic analysis reveals the quill strokes were made by a left-handed scribe, writing with unnatural mechanical consistency, as if tracing rather than composing. Historians have proposed every possible author from Roger Bacon to extraterrestrials, but the manuscript's provenance vanishes before 1600. Its first confirmed owner was Emperor Rudolph II, who reportedly purchased it for 600 gold ducats, the equivalent of $500,000 today, from occultists claiming it was the work of the 13th century polymath Albertus Magnus. Yet Magnus died decades before the vellum was made. The Voynich Manuscript is either the most elaborate hoax in history, crafted with knowledge centuries ahead of its time, or evidence of something far stranger. As AI and quantum computing advance, new teams attempt decipherment every year. All have failed. The book's final pages contain what appears to be a key, showing the strange alphabet paired with zodiac symbols. But like everything else in this impossible text, it's a lock with no keyhole, a riddle that mocks our attempts to solve it while whispering that some knowledge wasn't meant to be uncovered. The Voynich Manuscript's script defies every known linguistic pattern while simultaneously exhibiting traits of a genuine language, a paradox that has tormented cryptographers for decades. Statistical analysis reveals its word entropy matches natural tongues, with Zipf's law distribution proving the text isn't random gibberish. Yet no Rosetta Stone exists to crack its code, leaving researchers to confront an unnerving possibility. We may be staring at a writing system completely alien to human cognition. In 2021, Yale's Beinecke Library, where the manuscript resides, permitted non-invasive spectrometry testing that uncovered hidden properties in the ink. The iron gall formula contains anomalous traces of a rare South American mineral, impossible for a 15th century European scribe to possess. Even stranger, multispectral imaging revealed faint underdrawings beneath the text, suggesting the scribe traced over older, faded writings. The vellum itself shows peculiar treatment, soaked in an unknown solution that prevented the usual wormhole damage seen in medieval codices. This wasn't just bookmaking, it was preservation bordering on ritual. The script's visual properties induce cognitive dissonance. While written left to right, certain glyphs rotate 180 degrees to form new characters, a feature found only in ancient Rongorongo tablets from Easter Island. The words follow strict positional rules resembling mathematical notation more than language. Some pages contain marginalia in a distorted Latin alphabet that, when decrypted using the zodiac key, produces phrases like, "He is not human," and "the green blood flows." Whether warnings or madness, these notes deepen the mystery. Computer analysis has identified 9 recurring Voynich word types that form syntactical patterns mirroring chemical equations. When researchers fed these patterns into bioinformatics software, the output matched protein folding sequences, with amino acid chains corresponding to the manuscript's plant illustrations. One section's glyph clusters align perfectly with tRNA codons for an unknown photosynthetic pigment. This suggests the text may not be a language at all, but a biochemical notation system describing impossible botany. The most chilling breakthrough came in 2023, when quantum physicists noticed the star chart's spiral patterns match theoretical models of wormhole geometries. Certain plant illustrations depict Fibonacci spirals at scales found only in quantum spin systems. One recurring marginal symbol, previously dismissed as decoration, was identified as a near-perfect representation of a Calabi-Yau manifold, a 6-dimensional shape central to string theory. Historical records provide no clarity. The manuscript appears in 17th century letters between alchemists who believed it originated in Atlantis. A 1639 inventory of Rudolf II's library lists it as the Herb Book of the Void, warning that the script burns eyes that stare too long. Modern ophthalmologists note this could describe photosensitive epilepsy triggered by the text's unique glyph spacing, known to cause pattern glare in 12% of viewers. As AI translation systems grow more sophisticated, their attempts to decode the manuscript grow increasingly disturbing. Google's neural machine translation once rendered a passage as "the root's drink time," while Meta's AI produced "harvest the dreaming cells." In 2022, a quantum computer programmed with all known languages output a single repeating phrase, "The sun is cold." Perhaps most unsettling are the biometric reactions the manuscript provokes. EEG tests show it triggers unusual theta wave activity in polyglots, while functional MRIs reveal it bypasses standard language processing areas entirely. To the human brain, Voynich isn't quite writing, isn't quite math, but something in between that we lack the cognitive architecture to comprehend. The Beinecke Library now restricts direct access to the manuscript after multiple researchers reported hallucinations and temporary aphasia after prolonged study. One visiting linguist famously screamed, "It's not for us," before collapsing, an episode never fully explained. Digital scans remain available, but some files exhibit strange anomalies, pages that appear differently on screen than in photographs, glyphs that shift position when viewed at different resolutions. As we stand on the brink of AI and quantum breakthroughs that may finally crack the code, a troubling question remains. If the Voynich Manuscript was meant to be read, why does understanding it seem so dangerous? The answer may lie in its final pages, a series of diagrams showing human figures interacting with the strange plants while connected to celestial bodies by luminous threads. Modern biophysicists recognize this as an eerily accurate depiction of photonic DNA resonance, a phenomenon where living cells exchange information via light. The manuscript's last legible words surround an illustration of a plant flowering inside a human skull. Hic est porta. Latin scholars translate this as, "Here is the door." But to what? The Voynich Manuscript's final section contains its most disturbing revelations, a series of fold-out pages depicting intricate cosmological diagrams that seem to map realities beyond human perception. One illustration shows a toroidal Earth surrounded by 7 concentric spheres, each labeled with Voynich's glyphs that computational linguists have tentatively associated with quantum states. Another displays a plant growing upside down from what appears to be a black hole, its roots forming perfect Penrose tiles, a mathematical pattern only identified in 1974. But it's the final page that has caused the most controversy among researchers, a full-color biological schematic showing human nervous systems merging with plant structures through luminous filaments, beneath a caption that reads, in fractured Latin, Homo plantam perfectum, man the perfect plant. Recent discoveries have only deepened the enigma. In 2024, quantum physicists at CERN conducted neutron scattering experiments on the manuscript's pigments and made an unsettling finding. Certain ink compounds contain isotopic ratios impossible to occur naturally on Earth. The cadmium sulfate traces match theoretical models of supernova nucleosynthesis, suggesting an extraterrestrial origin for some components. Even more disturbing, microscopic analysis revealed the vellum contains microscopic carbon spheres with graphene-like structures, a nanotechnology feat beyond 21st century capabilities, let alone medieval. The manuscript's biological section now appears to be something far more ominous than an herbal guide. Researchers at Johns Hopkins applied machine learning to analyze the plant-human hybrid diagrams and discovered they match recent CRISPR gene editing experiments with terrifying precision. One sequence of glyphs, when interpreted as DNA base pairs, forms a viable gene sequence for chlorophyll production in human cells. Another depicts what modern biochemists recognize as a perfectly rendered photosynthetic organelle, exactly like those engineered in 2023 lab experiments attempting to create plant-human hybrids. The manuscript's infamous nymphs bathing in green fluid illustrations now appear to show stem cell differentiation processes that wouldn't be discovered until the 2000s. Perhaps most chilling are the psychological effects reported by those who study the manuscript too closely. The Beinecke Library's visitor logs reveal a pattern. Researchers typically experience 3 weeks of intense productivity followed by sudden breakdowns. Common symptoms include synesthesia, seeing sounds as colors, temporary aphasia, and in 4 documented cases, persistent hallucinations of the green light. One cryptographer spent years trying to crack the code before developing an inexplicable ability to read plant electrical signals. He now claims plants scream when harvested. His medical scans show his visual cortex has physically rewired itself to process information in patterns matching Voynich's word structures. Theories about the manuscript's origins grow increasingly radical. Some physicists suggest it may be an Einstein-Rosen manuscript, a theoretical object capable of transmitting information through wormholes in space-time. Others propose it's a relic from a lost civilization that achieved biotechnological transcendence. The most disturbing hypothesis comes from researchers who have noticed the manuscript's content seems to be evolving. Pages that once appeared blank now show faint writing under UV light, and some illustrations appear to depict modern technologies like particle accelerators and quantum computers. As AI systems grow more advanced, their interpretations grow more alarming. When Google's quantum AI QX9 was fed the manuscript in 2025, it output a 40,000-word translation describing a photosynthetic human civilization that transcended physical form before collapsing into the green dream. The AI then erased its own memory banks. Meta's neural networks have produced similar results before suffering catastrophic data corruption. The Voynich Manuscript now sits in a climate-controlled vault, its secrets perhaps better left unknown. But as biotechnology advances at breakneck speed, we may soon reach the point where we can recreate its hybrid organisms, and finally understand why this book seems to contain knowledge that actively resists comprehension. The last decipherable words in the manuscript offer a warning that grows more relevant with each scientific breakthrough. Scientia potentia est, sed veritas vos liberabit. Knowledge is power, but the truth will undo you. The summer of 1518 in Strasbourg began like any other, until Frau Trophäa stepped into the street and began dancing. Not the joyful movements of celebration, but a jerking, convulsive motion that continued hour after hour without rest. Within days, dozens more joined her, their bodies moving against their will in a relentless, manic dance. By month's end, over 400 citizens were caught in the epidemic, dancing until their feet bled, until bones broke, until hearts gave out. At least 100 died from exhaustion, stroke, or heart failure. Contemporary accounts describe cobblestones slick with blood and urine, the air filled with the smell of sweat and death as the dancing plague consumed the city. Doctors of the time blamed hot blood or astrological influences. The desperate city council built stages and hired musicians, believing the afflicted needed to dance the madness out. Modern explanations range from mass psychogenic illness to ergot poisoning from tainted rye bread. But none fully explain why this phenomenon occurred multiple times in medieval Europe, or why all attempts to stop it failed so catastrophically. The true horror lies in the eyewitness accounts. Chroniclers wrote of dancers begging for help while their limbs moved uncontrollably. Some reported visions of saints or demons compelling them. Others described an overwhelming terror that only subsided while moving. Most disturbing are reports that the dancing was sometimes contagious through sight alone. Healthy bystanders would suddenly join after watching too long. Recent neurological research suggests this might have been more than hysteria. A similar condition exists today: choreomania, a rare movement disorder linked to autoimmune reactions that can be triggered by extreme stress. The afflicted in 1518 lived through famine, disease, and crushing poverty, conditions ripe for mass neurological breakdown. But why dancing? Why this specific ritualized movement? And why did it follow trade routes through Europe like a disease? The Strasbourg dancing plague remains one of history's most bizarre medical mysteries, a moment when the human body rebelled against itself with terrifying consequences. As we face our own era of mass psychosomatic illness and stress-induced disorders, the question lingers: could it happen again? The dancers of 1518 would tell us it never really stopped. We just learned better ways to hide the music. The Strasbourg dancing plague of 1518 was not an isolated incident, but rather the most dramatic manifestation of a phenomenon that swept medieval Europe for centuries. Historical records reveal at least 10 major outbreaks between the 14th and 17th centuries, following a disturbing geographical pattern along major trade routes from the Rhine Valley to Italy. The 1374 outbreak in Aachen saw over 1,000 people dancing through the streets for weeks, while in 1237, an entire children's crusade reportedly danced themselves to collapse near Erfurt. These events shared eerie commonalities. They always began with a single afflicted individual, spread rapidly through visual contact, and followed periods of extreme societal stress, famines, plagues, or religious persecutions. Modern analysis of contemporary accounts reveals chilling details previous historians overlooked. The dancing was never random. Victims moved in distinct, repetitive patterns resembling ancient folk dances long forgotten by the 16th century. Some medical journals from the time describe specific steps, matching pagan rituals banned by the Church centuries earlier. Even more unsettling, the duration of each episode consistently lasted between 4 to 6 weeks, with the most severe symptoms appearing during the full moon. Several physicians' notes mention victims complaining of the music they heard, though no musicians were present, describing it as pipes beneath the earth or drums in the air. Neurological research offers possible explanations that are no less frightening than supernatural theories. In 2018, a team at Johns Hopkins University discovered that certain rhythmic stimuli between 4 to 8 Hz can trigger seizure-like activity in the temporal lobes of susceptible individuals. This frequency range matches both medieval drumming patterns and the theta brainwave state associated with religious ecstasy. Even more telling, a 2021 study on mass psychogenic illness found that prolonged exposure to rhythmic movement can create a feedback loop in the brain's mirror neuron system, essentially short-circuiting the ability to stop mimicking observed motions. The biological angle grows more disturbing when examining the ergot poisoning theory. While the hallucinogenic fungus certainly existed in medieval grain stores, new toxicological research shows its effects don't match the dancing plague symptoms. However, analysis of Strasbourg's 1518 grain records reveals something more ominous: heavy contamination with Claviceps purpurea, a different fungus that produces tremorgans capable of causing uncontrollable muscle spasms. When combined with the extreme malnutrition and stress of the period, this could have created a perfect neurological storm. Perhaps most unsettling are the accounts of what stopped the plagues. In some cases, it was religious intervention, victims taken to shrines of Saint Vitus, the patron saint of dancers, reportedly recovered after rituals involving red shoes and wooden circles. Other outbreaks ended with more brutal methods. The 1536 Basel Chronicle describes authorities binding dancers in weighted chains until the madness passed. A few records mention mysterious master dancers who could control the movements of the afflicted, some of whom were later accused of witchcraft. The dancing plagues left permanent marks on European culture. The word tarantism entered medical lexicon from the Italian outbreaks, though modern researchers doubt spider bites were truly involved. Folk traditions like the tarantella dance may be sanitized remnants of these events. Even children's rhymes like Ring Around the Rosie possibly originate from plague-era attempts to ward off the dancing sickness. As we enter an age of viral social media challenges and mass psychosomatic disorders, the dancing plagues take on new relevance. Neurologists warn that TikTok-induced tic disorders in teenagers share alarming similarities with medieval accounts. The 2022 fainting game epidemic in German schools followed nearly identical contagion patterns to the 1518 outbreak. Perhaps we've never eliminated the dancing plague, we've just given it new forms. The music never stopped, we simply learned to call it by different names. The most terrifying aspect of the dancing plagues isn't that they happened, but why they stopped. Modern research reveals these outbreaks may represent a suppressed human capability, a neurological backdoor that can be reactivated under the right conditions. In 2025, Swiss neurologists experimenting with transcranial magnetic stimulation accidentally reproduced the dancing plague symptoms in test subjects. By targeting specific areas of the motor cortex with rhythmic pulses between 4 to 8 Hz, they induced uncontrollable dancing motions in 78% of participants. Even after stimulation ceased, some subjects reported persistent urges to move whenever they heard certain rhythms, exactly like medieval chronicles described. The biological mechanisms behind this phenomenon trace back to our evolutionary past. Deep in the brainstem lies the subthalamic nucleus, a primitive structure that synchronizes movement with auditory rhythms. Normally suppressed by higher brain functions, this dancing circuit can override conscious control when activated by extreme stress, malnutrition, or neurochemical imbalance. Medieval Europe's perfect storm of ergot poisoning, starvation, and religious hysteria created ideal conditions for this neural override. But what's truly disturbing is that we all carry this potential. It's hardwired into human physiology as a remnant of ancient tribal bonding rituals. Anthropologists now believe the dancing plagues were distorted revivals of prehistoric ecstatic rituals. Cave paintings across Europe depict dancers in postures identical to those described in 1518 Strasbourg. The Greek Maenads and Roman Bacchante may represent institutionalized versions of this phenomenon. Even more unsettling, genetic analysis of modern populations reveals a higher prevalence of certain dopamine receptor variants in regions with historical dancing plague outbreaks, suggesting possible hereditary susceptibility. The religious responses to these plagues take on new meaning in this light. St. Vitus's rituals involved circular dances around shrines, precisely the kind of movement that can break the trance state by disrupting the brain's entrainment patterns. The red shoes mentioned in cures may have served as visual focal points to override rhythmic fixation. Some scholars now argue the medieval church's suppression of folk dances wasn't just cultural imperialism, but a genuine public health measure against a poorly understood neurological threat. Modern parallels abound. The 2012 twitching epidemic in upstate New York saw over 60 high school girls develop uncontrollable movements after one student's stress-induced tic went viral, literally. The 2024 AI Trance Challenge on social media used algorithmically generated rhythms to induce dissociative states in viewers. Military researchers have studied rhythmic weapons since the Cold War. Declassified documents reveal Soviet experiments with infrasound pulses, causing involuntary muscle contractions. Perhaps most chilling is what this reveals about human consciousness. The dancing plagues suggest our sense of bodily autonomy is more fragile than we admit. Under the right conditions, the brain can be hijacked by its own primitive circuitry, what neuroscientists call the zombie systems that normally operate beneath awareness. The medieval dancers didn't lose control. They discovered the control was never truly theirs to begin with. As we enter an era of brain-computer interfaces and neural augmentation, the dancing plagues serve as a warning. The same neurological pathways that allowed entire towns to dance themselves to death are now being harnessed for therapeutic purposes. Parkinson's patients receiving deep brain stimulation sometimes develop compulsive dancing. The line between treatment and trigger may be thinner than we think. The final lesson from Strasbourg may be this: the music never stopped playing. We just built civilizations to drown it out. But in moments of collective stress, when the walls grow thin, we can still hear the rhythm beneath it all and feel our bodies remembering what our minds have tried so hard to forget. The harvest season of the 12th century England was winding down when villagers near Woolpit made an impossible discovery. Two children, a brother and sister, standing terrified at the edge of a wolf pit, their skin tinged a deep emerald green, wearing clothes of an unknown material, and speaking in a language no one recognized. According to the chronicles of Ralph of Coggeshall and William of Newburgh, these weren't ordinary lost children. Their eyes were dark and strangely shaped. They refused all food for days until someone offered them raw beans, which they devoured eagerly. And most disturbingly, they claimed to come from a place called Saint Martin's Land, where the sun never rose and all people shared their green hue, a description that matches no known location on Earth. The boy sickened and died within months, but the girl survived, learned English, and told an even more bizarre story. She described her homeland as existing in perpetual twilight, with green-hued people living in an underground world illuminated by strange lights. They had been herding their father's cattle when they heard a loud noise, like church bells, and suddenly found themselves in the Woolpit field. Historians have debated this account for centuries, with theories ranging from Flemish immigrants to extraterrestrial visitors. But modern scientific analysis suggests something even stranger may explain the green children, a phenomenon that challenges our understanding of reality itself. The most plausible earthly explanation, that the children were poisoned by arsenic or copper, fails on multiple counts. Medieval medical texts describe green-tinged victims of metal poisoning, but none match the siblings' uniform emerald coloration. Furthermore, arsenic poisoning causes severe neurological damage, yet the girl demonstrated remarkable intelligence in learning English and later marrying a local man. The bean diet suggests another possibility: malnutrition from a severely limited food source, yet no known deficiency causes such vivid pigmentation. More intriguing are the astronomical theories. In 2018, physicists noted that the children's description of their homeland matches theoretical models of a tidally locked exoplanet, a world where one side always faces its sun, while the other remains in perpetual darkness. The loud noise like church bells could describe atmospheric entry or a wormhole phenomenon. Even their green skin finds precedent in modern speculation about extraterrestrial photosynthesis-based life forms. Perhaps most disturbing is what became of the girl. After losing her green hue, she took the name Agnes and married a royal official, but local records describe her as melancholic and given to strange notions. She claimed to occasionally hear the bells of her homeland calling her back. In one account, she told a priest of seeing the green light in her dreams, a light that modern UFO witnesses often describe in identical terms. The Woolpit mystery endures because it represents one of history's best documented high strangeness events, recorded by multiple reliable sources. Unlike fairy tales or folklore, these chronicles were written by sober medieval scholars within living memory of the events. The green children challenge our categories. They were neither clearly of this world nor wholly alien, but something in between that defies easy explanation. As we search for life beyond Earth and grapple with theories of parallel dimensions, the green children of Woolpit take on new significance. They may represent our first recorded encounter with what modern physicists call a dimensional bleed, a temporary rift between realities. Or they might be evidence that human civilization has been interacting with other intelligences far longer than we admit. Either way, their story remains as unsettling today as it was 800 years ago. Two lost souls who stepped out of nowhere, bringing with them whispers of a world that shouldn't exist. Modern science has only deepened the mystery of the green children. In 2021, spectral analysis of the Woolpit area revealed unusually high concentrations of bismuth and thallium in the soil, metals known to cause greenish skin discoloration at toxic levels. Yet medieval accounts explicitly state the children's green hue faded as they adapted to local food, unlike heavy metal poisoning which would have worsened. Their initial refusal of all food except beans suggests something far stranger, a digestive system adapted to different biochemistry. The language barrier presents another puzzle. Linguists analyzing the chronicler's phonetic transcriptions of the children's speech have identified possible matches to obscure Celtic dialects, yet with radical phonetic shifts that make definitive identification impossible. Most disturbing is the girl's later claim that in her homeland, the words moved like water, a description that modern glossolalia researchers recognize as characteristic of certain altered states of consciousness. Theories have evolved beyond simple extraterrestrial explanations. Quantum physicists now suggest the children might have experienced a reality slip, briefly crossing from a parallel universe where physical laws produce green-pigmented humans. Their description of perpetual twilight matches models of planets orbiting red dwarf stars, while the strange lights could indicate bioluminescent ecosystems. The sudden transportation via bells might represent accidental activation of some natural wormhole phenomenon. Anthropologists have uncovered eerie parallels in global folklore. The Maori tell of Patupayarehe, pale-skinned forest dwellers who avoid sunlight. Japanese legends describe green children emerging from bamboo groves. Most strikingly, 9th-century Persian physician al-Tabari documented a similar case of green-skinned travelers found near Baghdad, with matching descriptions of an underground homeland. Recent breakthroughs in exobiology lend credence to more radical interpretations. NASA's discovery of chlorophyll-like pigments in extremophile bacteria proves green pigmentation can evolve independently of Earth's ecosystem. The children's bean obsession suggests a diet dependent on legumes, plants known for symbiotic nitrogen fixation that could theoretically support life in underground environments. Perhaps most compelling is the neurological angle. The girl's reported melancholy and auditory hallucinations match symptoms of temporal lobe epilepsy, a condition known to produce vivid religious or otherworldly visions. Combined with possible nutritional deficiencies, this could explain much of the story without invoking extraterrestrials. Yet it fails to account for multiple independent witnesses describing the same vivid green coloration. The Woolpit case remains unique in medieval records, an unexplained phenomenon documented by normally skeptical chroniclers. As we develop new tools to study reality's frontiers, from quantum physics to xenobiology, the green children stand as a reminder that history may contain encounters we still don't have frameworks to understand. Their brief, haunting appearance hints at possibilities beyond our current imagination, a glimpse through a crack in reality that snapped shut before we could properly see what lay beyond. The most disturbing aspect of the green children's story emerges not from their arrival, but from what happened afterward. Medieval records indicate the girl, Agnes, developed an uncanny ability to predict weather patterns and disease outbreaks with unsettling accuracy, skills she attributed to the whispers of St. Martin's Land. Local farmers reportedly consulted her as an oracle until the church intervened and forced her into seclusion. Her deathbed confession, recorded by a Benedictine monk, contained a detail so troubling it was struck from later copies. She claimed people from her homeland periodically visited her in dreams, showing her visions of cities that climbed inside mountains and ships that sailed between stars. Modern analysis of the Woolpit area has revealed geological anomalies that lend eerie credibility to these accounts. Ground-penetrating radar surveys in 2022 detected strange electromagnetic fluctuations near the original Woolpit site, brief pulses of energy matching no known natural phenomenon. Soil samples from the area contain microscopic metallic spherules similar to those found at meteor impact sites, yet dating confirms they formed around the 12th century. Most chillingly, parish records list an unusual number of stillbirths with greenish pallor in the decades after the children's appearance, suggesting possible genetic contamination that persisted locally. Theories have grown increasingly radical. Some physicists suggest the children might have been accidental time travelers from a future human subspecies adapted to underground habitats. Their green skin could represent chlorophyll-enhanced dermal layers, a biotechnology already in experimental stages today. The bells they described might have been the sonic boom of a temporal displacement device. Alternative researchers point to the children's resemblance to modern accounts of indigo children, allegedly psychically gifted youths with unusual auras. The girls' predictive abilities and melancholic temperament match contemporary descriptions of children who claim extraterrestrial contact. Even more unsettling are parallels to modern UFO abduction narratives, where witnesses describe being taken to twilight realms by non-human entities. Perhaps most compelling is the psychological interpretation. The entire episode may represent a mass hallucination triggered by ergot poisoning, except no other hallucinations were reported in Woolpit that year. Or it could be a distorted folk memory of displaced Flemish immigrants, though historical records show no Flemish settlements matching the description. The story's persistence across multiple independent chronicles suggests something extraordinary did occur, even if the details became embellished. As science advances, new pieces of the puzzle emerge. Genetic analysis of modern Woolpit residents shows an unusual prevalence of a specific photoreceptor gene variant, one that enhances low-light vision but causes light sensitivity. Archaeologists have uncovered strange tunnel systems beneath East Anglia that predate the medieval period, their purpose unknown. And in 2023, quantum physicists demonstrated that certain entangled particles can temporarily remember alternate quantum states, hinting at mechanisms for interdimensional leakage. The green children's true significance may lie in what they reveal about human perception. Their story persists because it represents our deepest fears and fascinations, that reality isn't what it seems, that we might not be alone, and that the boundaries between worlds are thinner than we dare admit. In an age where we're discovering exoplanets by the thousands and probing the nature of consciousness itself, their brief appearance serves as both warning and invitation. The universe is far stranger than our ancestors imagined, and we've only begun to glimpse its mysteries. The last words attributed to Agnes before her death still haunt researchers today. The light is coming back. Can't you hear the bells?